Great. Good morning, everyone. Hello. Good morning or good evening, depending where you're joining us today. I'm Carmen Guerrero Sotelo. I'm the business manager of Quilimo in Mexico. And joining us today is Sarah Hoverstan. We are going to be talking about water stewardship and climate action. And before we start with this conversation, I'd like to give you a little briefing about who we are at Quilimo. And Lucia, if you can share your screen. Or well, I'm going to say you without the slides. Well, at Quilimo, we are a climate tech startup that is focused on water stewardship solutions in agriculture using technology to address the water scarcity exacerbated by climate change. And what we do in our daily basis is to connect corporations and stakeholders that are investing in water security with local farmers to conserve water in the most water stressed basins across Latin America. And now I would like to hand it over Sarah. Sarah, how are you today?
I'm great, Carmen. Good morning. Good morning where I am. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, yes. I think we have people from all over the world, I hope. And Sarah, thank you very much for being today with us. I'm sure we're gonna gain a lot of value from your insights, from your knowledge, your experience. And Sarah, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who is BEF?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Again, I am Sarah Roberson. I am the Senior Director of the Business for Water Stewardship program at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. That is a big nonprofit mouthful of things. But BEF for short, we are a nonprofit that is based in the Pacific Northwest. And we are really focused on advancing Pacific Northwest, of the United States. And we are focused on advancing solutions that address climate challenges by restoring freshwater ecosystems and catalyzing renewable energy future for all. The program which I represent and oversee, specifically the BWS program, is now one of the leading entities that's working with companies to help them participate in and fund water resilient solutions that address our shared water challenges to ultimately benefit people, communities, and nature.
Great.
Primarily, we work on behalf of corporate partners to vet and develop and fund water projects. Started really across North America, but increasingly internationally now. Really, our team takes a lot of pride in helping to improve corporate water stewardship strategies, understanding the priority target basins, and developing partnerships with partners, investing in water projects, and then ultimately helping to impact various watersheds across the world. I'll say that we have three primary pillars of work in the work that we do. The one is thought and movement leadership. And it's really how are we getting more companies involved in water stewardship and smarter water policies? How are we shaping the direction of the industry, and how are we kind of catalyzing collective action in the space where we work? The water stewardship strategy guidance, and then the third one being the water project scoping, development, funding, and management. And just to close out kind of the who we are, since 2009, really and increasingly like very recently, but the number since 2009 is BEF has helped facilitate over $46 million in funding for over 450 water projects across North America and select international locations that have collectively restored 59 billion gallons of water to date. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about these issues today and look forward to getting into it.
Yeah, I bet you should feel very proud, Sarah. And BEF is a great organization, and we have the pleasure to work with you. And Sarah, so let's dive in the conversation. And I think we should start with the basics because many times we think that all the people know what we're talking about and these fancy words to say something. So can we start asking you what is corporate water stewardship?
Yeah, thanks, Herman. And I appreciate us laying out the context here, especially in any line of work where you work in your space and you think everyone understands what you're talking about, which isn't always the case, right? So when we talk about corporate water stewardship, this is what we're talking about. So more and more global companies are looking to assess and reduce their water risks business risks related to water. And it's common now that many are setting corporate water positive goals or something named like that, and have programs in place to help achieve those goals. And generally, water stewardship programs encompass all the efforts to reduce water use in their own operations and in their value chains, but as well as environmental water replenishment. And specifically, I think in BEF's work, and I think the nature of our conversation today, we're talking about water replenishment and restoration targets. These provide companies a global metric that can be tracked and shared, measured against. And And quite specifically in this context, water replenishment means supporting projects and solutions that will deliver a volume of water to a local watershed and community over a designated period of time. And I think a really good example of one of these targets, just as it's very clear, is a public one stated by Google. And Google states that Google will replenish more water than they consume by 2030 and support water security in communities where they operate. And then the role of a group like VF is help them operationalize that and help them achieve those goals by supporting a variety of water projects across the globe.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And just to give like more information to our audience, when we talk about this kind of projects, a lot of people ask us the question of why is a Google or a Intel working in this? They is not that clear. Why they should be interested in corporate water stewardship. Maybe in a food and beverage company is more easy to understand, but the tech companies is not that quite easy.
Yeah, good question. And I think that a lot of this work did start really with the food and beverage companies or even the consumer packaged good companies. But ultimately, every company uses water and every community uses water. And for tech companies in particular, there is in traditional data center and cooling towers, there's a lot of water consumed in the cooling of data centers and water consumed in our office building structures and throughout supply chains of various groups. So fortunately, it is one of the kind of environmental climate impact sustainability strategies that many companies are more engaged in. We're all a little bit more used to hearing about carbon and renewable energy commitments and impacts. And water, fortunately, is getting up to speed and getting up to pace with it as groups start to realize that there are, as water scarcity and water quality issues are just exacerbated because of climate impacts across the globe. Many are thinking about long-term strategies, their impact on water, and their business risks that are related to, will they have enough water to operate? And will there be enough water for their employees and their communities to customers to live where they are?
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned some point that I want to talk more about why these companies are investing in this, but let's wait a little bit. And I would like to say to our audience that you can write your questions on our chat, and 20 minutes before we finish our conversation, we're gonna read all your questions. So please ask us anything you want. And okay, Sarah, and having that in mind, what you said about carbon and water, I think is very important to put in the center of the conversation water and also agriculture. And I like to bring to the table that one of the example of this was what happened last year at the COP28, the conference of the Paris from the United Nations, when occurred for the first time that they signed this declaration of sustainable agriculture, resilient food systems, and climate action. And with this, they elevated the importance of food systems to build a resilient climate futures for all, no, not just for a specific sector, but for all. And I don't want to talk a lot about this, but just to mention a few key points that I think are valuable. They talk about scaling up the resilience and adaptation, climate adaptation activities of farmers, through financial and technical support Also, they talk about strengthening water management, and another one was maximizing the climate and environmental benefits of restoration, conservation, and protecting land and ecosystems. And in on that note, Sarah, I would like to ask you how BEF has experienced the impact of agriculture in water, or in water stewardship specifically.
Yeah, absolutely, Carmen. So, obviously there's the agriculture companies and supply chains themselves that are working very hard at figuring this out and committing to these goals. And thinking in this corporate water stewardship action space, agriculture and agriculture-based projects are a huge part of what we do. As we all know, in many regions around the world, the agriculture industry is one of the largest users of fresh water. So naturally, it provides one of the greatest opportunities to help increase conservation efforts and stewardship engagements. We have witnessed both across North America and internationally in the projects that we can help facilitate that there are great opportunities to partner with agriculture communities and companies to help farmers use less water more efficiently, and to kind of extend those benefits to the entire community and in particular the environment as well. For some more specificity on that, I think many of the corporate water stewardship program projects that we have facilitated in funding will help incentivize farmers or ranchers to keep water in the rivers, to pull less water from the rivers and designate them for environmental purposes, converting crops to lower water use crops in some instances, increasing irrigation efficiency practices, whether that's converting from flood irrigation to drip irrigation, or lining of leaky canals, irrigation canals where water is either leaking into the ground or evaporating before it gets used. And then to cases like using AI to optimize when and how to water, like our projects with Kilimo in the Mayapo Basin and other locations. I think the interesting thing with agriculture projects is that they're a really good fit. Where not only they have a significant impact that many people can understand, right, of how we help the ag industry consume less water, but they're also very measurable. And this is part of we do, which I think we might talk about a little bit later on, but this concept of water replenishment is kind of built on this foundation of this volumetric benefit. And this goes, I think, Carmen, a little bit back to the first question of like why and how companies are participating. Because that through line isn't really clear on why a tech company would be participating in it. Many of these companies have established these goals around this consideration of volume restored, right? We use X amount of water in our operations. We're going to restore the similar amount of water to nature or conservation in some way. So it's put this really tangible metric on it. But in order for that metric to be credible and our goals and our claims to be credible, we need to evaluate, and we need to measure, and we need to report on the volume of water that is conserved and restored. And agriculture projects in particular provide a really clear methodology and measurement for capturing how much water was conserved in all of these practices. So they always are a huge part of the portfolio of projects funded really across every basin, whether the basin's primary issue be water scarcity or even water quality.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And now that you were giving us these examples, it comes to my mind, if you can, and since you have the experience, can you give us some or mention examples of interventions from nature-based solutions to technology, of course, not only in agriculture, but in the whole spectrum of water stewardship?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a constantly evolving field of work, right? And so when the work started, there was consideration of project types that had this very concrete, measurable understanding of water conserved or water restored. And so a narrower set of projects that were being funded in earlier iterations of corporate water stewardship programs. A lot of agriculture projects, a lot of what we would consider water leasing projects or flow restoration projects, which would be those who have water rights that they can pull off of a river or groundwater, encouraging them or incentivizing them to keep them in the river for the full system benefit. And then as the industry has grown and the commitments have grown, and companies and partners like us that are really focused on shared water challenges grown, the types and breadth of projects that are applicable in these programs are beginning to grow. And that's what we want to see. But just for the kind of list of project types, obviously we talked a lot about agriculture or irrigation efficiency upgrades. There are a lot of habitat restoration, or we call nature-based solution projects, which is could be the restoration or protection of a healthy wetland ecosystem that is contributing to groundwater enhancement and water quality, pollution reduction. Others could be benefits for recreational opportunities, right? Whether that is fishing, boating, hiking access. We talked about in-stream flow. There's green infrastructure, right? And like stormwater capture, tree planters and stuff that are both helping to capture, clean, slow the flow of water so that we can kind of capture it where we need it when we need it.
Soil conservation activities, no, also.
Yeah, and conservation activities. I think this is the area that getting more into too on like how are we conserving in the urban space as well. So this will be leak detection projects, either at the utility scale, and how are we detecting leaks in our pipes, water utility pipes, that we could reduce those, to as small as leaky toilets and water that's leaking from toilet use, and how are we capturing and fixing those so that we are conserving water that we're not really using. Water quality is a big piece too, both in stormwater management and also in agriculture practices, wastewater treatment, such. And then there's also the category, which many on the call may be familiar with, which is the WASH category. So water access, sanitation, and hygiene, and how are we supporting those sorts of projects as well. So many of them, and we keep hopefully adding more, right? Because there's a little bit of this construct, this project of water stewardship, and us trying to say, okay, how do we look at these projects, verify these projects so that they can be attributable to the objectives of the corporate partners, so that we can address different types of water issues based on shared water challenges, and not just the projects that we know can have a volume and we can count them towards corporate goals.
Yeah, sure. And I think it also, well, I guess it also depends. It's not just like the corporate has this volume target and maybe the year, but it's also important to know the conditions of that minor basin or the major basin, at what level the project should be deployed. I don't know, the reality of the place, right? Which kind of communities live in there, because it's not like you can do the same, for example, in the south of Mexico or in the border with Mexico and United States. No, the realities are very different from nature and the people that live in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. To even the kind of logistical structures of funding projects, right? And what are permitting requirements in that area, and how do we fund the projects and the organizations doing the work to advance the projects, and what does that timeline look like and scale? So it's a very interesting element. Many of the corporations who have stated public goals and public replenishment goals have a 2030 sightline on, right? So we will restore X amount of water by 2030. And so the way that they're looking at this is an annual volume, kind of to match annual volume. So supporting projects that are going to annually deliver a specific volume benefit in a region that by 2030, all of them are active and they're restoring hopefully their target volume of water. But most of them have priority locations across the globe, right? So you're looking at a portfolio across the globe of all these different priority basins and watersheds with different shared water challenges, with different types of partners, different types of interventions, those at different stages of the industry where they are with this concept of, corporations funding water projects. So a lot of what we do is kind of playing this middle maker, or else this like matchmaker in aligning what the corporate goals are and the objectives with your point, Carmen, like the on the ground realities of what the issues are, who's providing the solutions, what kind of support do they need to get the projects implemented. And it's a little bit of a dance to get everything aligned,
Yes,
right?
from what they need and what they are and what is happening in that area, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yes, and Sarah, we have been talking about like basics from water stewardship, what companies are doing, different types of interventions in water stewardship. But I think we should go also to the place maybe a few steps before, because we're giving these examples from the companies that they already know what they have to do. They already measure the water footprint, and maybe they have these water stewardship leaders in the company as collaborators. But for the companies that let's say that they don't know how to start this path or how to join to these efforts, uh, how they can join these efforts, no? Because at the end, all the companies, not just the big ones and the global companies, use water, no? In Latin America, we have a lot of the local companies that are big ones, but they don't really know how to start this path. They already did this with carbon. They know what they need to do. They have their goals, but with water, I think there's information, but not that much as carbon. No? What do you recommend for these companies to join these efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carmen. And it's so a little bit of it is like making the case, right? Like why or how water stewardship can be a company, and then how do you build out a program and operationalize the program? But I think you're right. And I would say even beyond just the business world, I think globally, unless you are impacted by the climate stressors day to day, many people don't fully grasp the issues with fresh water.
Yes.
Or where our water comes from, or all of it. Have we properly valued water? I don't think we have, and we are hitting tipping points in cities now when we're approaching day zero for some cities with water access to all of the challenges that we're seeing across the globe from a water perspective. I think for water scarcity in particular, society is right now placing value judgments on how do we beneficially use something that is increasingly a limited resource. And between climate change and outdated policies and social values, it's making us hard for us to agree on the economic, the social, or the environmental trade-offs when it comes to what is the beneficial use of water. And I think one of our kind of greatest challenges that we'll face and many businesses face is how do we not prioritize like short-term economic gains at the expense of sustainable economic and community development systems, right? So this is taking the long-term approach of concerns around water scarcity and understanding, okay, ultimately, will there be enough water to operate this business in this basin? And will there be enough water for the people, the employees, the consumers, the customers to like live comfortably in this and prosper and support it? And so considering that, like as a business and considering what are the business risks around growing water challenges and how can we develop a program to help combat that and communicate that, I think is a key element. There's a lot of information out there for companies who have assessed their water risk through partners like the World Resources Institute and others, and then have developed programs to combat that. But in addition to the real risks of water in the basin in which you need it in order to operate your business, we also talk a lot about what we would consider, I'm sure there's other names for this, but the social license to operate or the reputational risk in the region, right? Of even if it's just perception, if you're citing a new business in a region that is perceived to be a high water user, and the community knows that they're already scraping by from a water scarce perspective, how are those in the community going to feel about the business coming in and using the water and the priority? And how does that as a company prioritize, just as you would, now we're seeing it with renewable energy and carbon when they're siting new places, how do we prioritize water and water to the benefit of the community as part of siting and development plans, so that we are viewed as like a responsible user of the resources and in the community. I think we're also at an interesting time where a lot of the goals and objectives were developed around this concept of volumetric water in order to have a metric that many people could use in their companies to get it up the executive chain, right? And say, here's a clear metric. We use this water. We want to restore this water. Let's build a budget after it. That is and it can be a very narrow metric, and it can be a limiting metric when it comes to the kind of water impact we want to have. So I would encourage groups now that are either looking at rewriting their water targets or objectives or writing new ones, that there's a lot of consideration for what kind of impact is needed from a water perspective, and how do we write goals that allow flexibility in the kinds of solutions that we can invest in to achieve them. And there's a lot of great resources and coalitions out there. There's the CEO Water Mandate and the Water Resources Coalition that is helping companies look at their impact and come together to think about solutions in basins. The World Resources Institute, a lot of this work. So I think there's places that we can point some people, Water Mandate, that would be beneficial, but I'm hoping that everyone is more forward-looking in their programmatic approaches in this, that will allow us to kind of address more concerns and not be too pinned by this concept of water replenishment or volume moving forward.
Yes, and I think actually a lot of organizations that are working this, I think they are not feel very comfortable using the term of replenishment because of what you say. No, maybe it can sound like it's just a transaction that you took water from a basin and you replenish that water, no? And it's not just like that, no, and it needs not to be like that. And also, Sarah, you have been mentioning this guide, I think not a lot of people, and maybe it's the same in our audience. They don't know this guide. And talking again about carbon, there's a lot of information. Exists these auditors for the carbon projects, and in the water projects exists for water projects is this guide. The name is the volumetric water benefit accounting for our audience to know. And this guide is is an international guide that was developed by the World Resources Institute, and is very helpful, as Sarah said, to measure, monitor, and report with all the transparency of the data that have been and has been generated with a project. And with this kind of reports based on the volumetric water benefit accounting guide, these projects can be validated, for by a third party. But as you said, Sarah, is not. Of course, we need to implement the projects based in this guide, but it's important to go to impact beyond that, to impact the communities, to put in the center of the projects the key stakeholders, build territory with them for the success and long term of the project. So, Sarah, if you want to talk a little bit about this guide, and how is like it's like I don't know, like I don't know how to say, like a connected process using this guide, but also since the beginning of the project, start building this relationship with the key stakeholders, which can be or are the most common stakeholders in the water stewardship projects.
Yeah, absolutely, Carmen. It's we'll know that this environmental water stewardship or replenishment or restoration is completely voluntary at this point, right? And
yeah. And that's
federal-
very, Sarah, that's very important to say. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just the last week, some people ask us this question, that why the companies do this, if there's not like a policy, or if there is a policy that they need to accomplish. But no, yeah, I think it's great that you bring that to the table.
Right, and there are plenty of that, right? There's regulatory elements. I'm less familiar with all the regulatory elements in international locations, but in places like the US, if you cite something and you take up some wetland area, you need to restore wetland in another area. There are things in place that kind of companies need to do from a regulatory standpoint related to water, or on their operational sites. This is a bit of a different category, right? And it's voluntary. And I'll note that these things like the volumetric water benefit accounting protocols and others exist too, because we understand that there is greater and greater scrutiny around sustainability claims being made by companies, right? So this is coming out of how do you substantiate these claims and make sure, and how do we as groups outside of the company make sure that what people are saying they're doing is actually happening. And that's a really important thing that we want to make sure happens. But the volumetric water benefit accounting protocol is, as you said, it's a guideline for those. If you do have a volumetric goal, target, claim you want to make, here are some better practices for standardizing companies, for helping standardize companies for reporting the benefits, tracking and measuring those projects, reporting the benefits of those projects, and ensuring kind of guardrails to make sure that the claims that are being made are credible. Again, it's guidelines, and it's a helpful way to look at what types of projects to consider, and kind of what projects would be in, what projects would be out. How you look around claims and communication on those projects, how you track and report annually on those projects, and how that gets rolled up into a communications effort. These were released early, I think 2019 was the first one, and they're currently under a rewrite. BEF is fortunately a part of that project team that's looking at the VWBA 2.0, which is built around things that have been learned in the past couple of years on funding these projects.
There's a lot of, sorry, Sarah, a lot of information about the claims, no? Because also there is a lot of doubts about how to make the claims, who can make the claims, if it depends in the investment that they are doing, if it's a co-inversion. There's a lot of doubts around claims also.
Right. And like what methodology should be used per project type to consider volume, right? And one of the things that we talk a lot about on our team is that the conservation organizations or agencies or local governments or water districts, whomever is implementing projects, isn't implementing their project for an output of a volumetric benefit for a corporate claim, right? They're implementing their projects for various other impacts, whether it's biodiversity or habitat or a variety of other things.
Social KPIs and
and so we're kind of translating the outputs of the projects into this consideration of this volumetric benefit. So the protocols help guide companies or practitioners in doing that. Again, it's voluntary and it's designed to be a guide, because companies are going to write their programs. They're going to make different decisions on how they assess projects. They may look at the scale of a watershed basin differently, depending on where their operations are. But it's provided to be guidance and trying to streamline it across the industry. But to your point is, given the scope of the water challenges that we face across the globe, we're hoping to add some new and detailed guidance around how do we incentivize companies towards more transformational solutions that enable additional benefits or catalyze new opportunities, and essentially how do we help companies get credit for funding early projects or being in the community. And it's all under discussion, right? It's the kind of neat thing, but also vexing thing about a voluntary product where it's like, well, don't really
we'll be waiting for that new recommendations.
Yeah.
And Sarah, so about all this that we have been talking, I like to highlight the importance of the effective water management, because it may sound like water stewardship is just an environmental issue, but as you said, is also a business issue, a business imperative, since when companies, government, and in general, if we talk about water governance, when there's a good or efficient water management, this will lead to mitigate financial, operational risk, and also enhance the long-term viability of the business, right? And with this on mind, I like to ask my last question, to have time to read the question from our audience. I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask you if you can explain us the difference between investing in the owns company supply chain for water efficiency, and the difference of investing in replenishment, because we have seen that also there's a lot of confusion with these two kind of interventions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There, we would surmise that in order to address water security, water resiliency issues across the globe, in particular in water scarce areas, we really need the two parts of the equation, right? We need to
Yes.
reduce the water we use, both at the individual level, but at the corporate level, in operations, in supply chains, in their value chains. We need to conserve water in the things. And then the other part of the equation is we need to restore water to nature and to communities, and to have the water where we need it, when we need it, for the benefit of more people for a longer period of time. And so that first part of the equation is really the maybe the on-site, within the fence line or within the four walls, even within the supply chain. I think the same conversations are happening in water as we're in carbon, of like whose responsibility is what as you go up the supply chain or up the value chain. But that's one part of it, right? Of conserving in the operations and in the business side. And then the part that we spent most of the time talking about today is how are we moving beyond the fence line, and how are companies looking at restoring water for the benefit of the whole system and for the benefit of all people. And that does include, we used to joke that people would be like, okay, so you're taking water out of one area and dumping it into another. It's not that. Some projects may move some water around, but the portfolio of projects that can be included in outside of the company's supplier value chain do consider conservation, right? They could be conserving for the municipal water supply. But then in many places, they're also just restoring it to nature. And we're looking at how do we benefit all of it? How do we benefit businesses? How do we benefit communities? How do we benefit species? How do we benefit the environment? And that's what the second part of the equation is, right? Of like looking at water resiliency, and we can only achieve water resiliency if we have clean, reliable water for all people and all communities.
Yes, and all species.
And all species.
Yeah, and because I think it's very easy because even though you're efficient, sorry, in your own facility, if the origin of the water, the basin, is running out of water, it doesn't matter how much you're being efficient inside of your facility, if there's no water outside,
Exactly.
in the origin. Okay,
Exactly.
so let's go and read the questions. William Lozano said, do water stewardship alliances have standards and methods to verify if companies are complying with their self-imposed promises?
I think I'm gonna see if I can do this too.
You can see them also in the chat.
Are you working down or up? So yeah, so I think that the volumetric water benefit accounting protocols and those help. Is there currently, and there's a lot of partners that exist in the space that are helping the corporate partners, right? So they have their funding, many of them have third-party organizations that are kind of validating the methodology used for the volume calculations. And then there are groups that are getting reporting, right? So just ensuring that the projects are implemented, they're happening as designed, and ultimately that the water benefit is occurring in the time that it's occurring. There's not one particular kind of watchdog group that is assessing every company's claims and their achievement to it. But a lot of the companies right now do have audits in place on their own accord that is ensuring that what they're saying they're investing in is happening, and all of the substantiation is needed to be there, and whether that is an independent audit that's happening by an accounting protocol firm or through their ESG programs. Those are starting to happen more and more that are ensuring that what the companies are saying that they're doing and the claims that they're making are in fact happening.
Yes. Yes.
And I think too, even to mention in the VW VA work, also the CEO water mandate work, there's a lot of peer-to-peer connection, right? So those in the companies who are tasked with this or overseeing the water stewardship programs want them to be credible programs, and they're working with their peers and other corporates to ensure that the industry is kind of working as they would like to see it, right? Because one bad actor in it could have an impact about the credibility of other companies' programs as well.
Yes.
So there's a little like peer-to-peer engagement and pressure, if you will, to ensure that there's substantiated programs in place.
Yes, yes, of course. And I think make these statements like that these companies will replenish every drop of water that they use. It's a big commitment. If they are not going to accomplish this, they will not be saying this in public. No, they are saying this because there's a lot of work before they made this public. No, and they know if they are not accomplished this, they will be in problems. No. Well, Malca Gijon, she said one solution to create a sustainable agriculture is using treated wastewater to irrigate, which has multiple benefits. Have you considered this option for the projects?
And I unfortunately can't speak to a lot of the technical elements of all of the projects that are happening across the globe. Some of that is dependent on policies, regional policies, and the ability to use treated wastewater for it. But I do know that that is happening in many locations, and some of the projects that are being funded are including that of how you using treated wastewater for agriculture use. Also, treated wastewater to be used for watering in certain areas too. So you're not drawing fresh water for watering of a golf course or watering a landscape, and how you can use treated wastewater to do that. So it is being considered. There are organizations doing that, I think, dependent upon the local policies in areas, but definitely part of the solution set.
Great. Rodrigo Fernandez, what's your take on rainwater harvesting? Is it really a solution worth implementing in, for example, rural communities? What impacts could we expect on this kind of systems if we're looking at rain patterns changing because of climate change?
Yeah, Rodrigo, great question. Again, probably a little beyond my comfort level in speaking to at the global level. I do think it has been an implemented solution for a lot of areas that you could use it, but your point on changing rainwater patterns is hard, right? So is it a sustainable solution for a lot of locations? And I'm not sure. I can say that some rainwater harvesting programs have been part of corporate water stewardship programs in the past where they make good sense. And all of it is led by the community space, right? So if there's shared water challenges and shared goals and directives of community organizations working towards implementing water solutions, the plan, and if that's part of one that they think is part of the solution, then we think it's a valuable engagement to do it. Can I say that I don't know if I would say it is or not worth implementing in areas,
Yeah.
because I think it's really dependent on the place. Now, the other thing is, yeah, changing rain patterns and climate change can shift, but what could be done today to get the water where we need it today is also a meaningful solution that might need to change 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We need to look at different solutions in the areas.
Yes, sure. And as you said, Sarah, I think we cannot see the solutions like these are the solutions globally. No, we need
Yeah,
to go
totally.
case by case. Know, as we said, know the reality, know the community, how's the ecosystem, and based on that, the solution needs to be designed.
Yeah.
And with that question of Rodrigo, I would like to give an example. Here in Mexico City, as you know, we having a lot of problems with water now, with water stress. But we have a long um, uh, rain season. No, so here in some areas there's these rainwater harvesting schools from rural communities, and for those schools in those communities is a valuable solution, since they don't have um, a good access to water. No, so
Yeah.
yeah, in that case is a good solution, and because we have a good rain season, if we are, for example, in the north of Mexico or in the south of United States, Arizona, where the rain is not, you have a very short rain season, I think it's not the best solution, no, because you don't have a lot of rain in there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, Arvin, that illustrates like a really good point um, with water from the programs. The primary difference between carbon and water is that water is local, right? So you can't say you have a program that you're operating in the Mayapo Basin in Santiago, and you have a program in the United States and say, oh, we're water neutral because we're restoring
No.
water to the earth. I mean, I guess you could. You'd probably get some scrutiny for that, but the impact is a local base, right? And we think a lot of the water projects is one of our biggest challenges is we have created communities and industries that we have moved water from its natural location and piped it and moved it around, that we oftentimes don't have the water where we need it when we need it most. And so how are we creating solutions that are allowing for the collection of water, the cleaning of water, whether that's a natural solution, like a nature-based solution, or rainwater harvesting or others, so that we capture the water from runoff. We have water where we need it, when we need it. We're using it at its optimal source. And it's going to be a lot of different solutions. And we would never advise a company to create some kind of program where they're going to say, this is our program, and we're going to implement it the same way every location.
Yes,
Doesn't work that way.
yes, and I think we're almost run of time. So there is one last question. It's in Spanish, but I'm going to translate it for you, Sarah. Alejandro Alexis said, thanks. This question is for Sarah. I would like to see some opportunities to keep contributing to conservation some forests. Alejandro is saying that he's in charge of the proper management of a 5,000 hectares of native forest in Chile. So he would like to explore opportunities from outside of Chile to keep conserving this forest.
Yeah.
And sorry, sir, before you answer, Alejandro, there's this organization that is called Acción Andina. They are doing a great work there over there. Maybe you can contact them. I'll give you the website, and if you want the direct contact, you can write to Kilimo. And I don't know if you want to say something about that, Sarah. Also,
just to note that I think forest restoration, forest health and maintenance projects, fire risk reduction, all of that has volumetric benefit. And as I think this is noting that there is the capture and filtration of water associated with sustainable forest management health. We have supported the funding of a number of those types of projects in the United States, and would be eager to look at similar projects in other parts of the country. If near Santiago, the Mayapó Basin, it is a key water priority area of a number of corporate partners, and I'd be happy to share my email if we'd like to discuss opportunities like that more. Actually.
Okay. So thank you very much. I think we are run out of time. Somebody asked me to write my email. I'm gonna write it down. There you have my email.
And I'm gonna share mine as well,
yeah,
too.
If you can share your email too, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, Sarah, for your time. It was great having this conversation. Our second webinar in English.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to deliver this in English.
No, thank you. And yeah, because we're not native speakers, so thank you for your patience. And yeah, please keep joining us for our word talks, and see you soon. Have a nice day, everyone. You too, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.